So very, very important topic as far as our research journey is concerned, because to write a research paper is an art, it's a science which follows by certain rules, certain criterias that we all need to abide and follow as a part of the writing process. So if we follow this process in a rigorous manner, our research paper will turn out to be on a scientific manner, and through which we can talk our paper at good journals, through which we can recognize our research work, and at the same time it will be able to help us to get good citation process. So it is very, very important for all of us to understand this process in a very rigorous manner, and through which we can produce our paper in a more qualitative manner, so that the future readers will also get the benefit, and they will also refer the same process. And to follow this and to do this, there are certain process, there are certain steps that we have to follow as a part of research paper. So let me begin with this. So first of all, we need to understand the first process of research idea generation, right? So whenever we are thinking about writing any sort of paper, firstly, we need to think about the idea generation, right? On which topic we need to find out the research, on which topic we need to process our research paper. So very, very important for all of us to identify the research idea in terms of research topic on which we want to do the research work, right? So that is called research idea generation. So if we understand this process, very important, rigorous manner, so almost everything would be clear on this front. So the research always start with the idea of research, that is the topic on which we want to do the research. So it is very, very important that we should have the proper idea and justification about the research topic on which we want to do the research. So this always comes from the researcher's perspective, that what is the research topic, is that what is their idea of research in the segment of research where the research person wants to do the research, and if at all we have those idea and segmentations, right, we have a certain idea to proceed further in terms of research idea, right? So this idea will be always be generated from the second process, that is called the systematic literature review. So systematic literature review is nothing but whatever past study that we have it, whatever the past research that has been done on our research topic. So at least we have a go through it. We should have a thorough analysis on this. We should read it properly, and through which we would get it some idea, on which topic we want to do the research. Let's say research always start with this EIC model. Research always start with this EIC model. So EIC model means E stands for economic, I stands for industry, and C stands for company, right? So research always start with EIC model. So that is economy, industry, and company. So if we have an economical analysis, so economic means the area on which we have to do the research. That is the country, the location, the state where we have to do the research. Once we are clear with that, we also need to think about the industry. Let's say if I'm in India, so I have to think about certain industry, like whether I want to go for the steel industry, whether I want to go for FMCG's industry. So which industry I want to do my research, right? So that is called industry specific, which I have to take the decision. So that is called the industry. And the third component that we have to think about it is company, right? So let's say if I have decided my industry, right? So based on that industry, on which company I wanted to do the research, because if at all I'm picking up any particular industry, I could not go for the research for all the companies of this industry, right? Because I have to make my research to be on the funnel process. So research always start with the funnel process. This is called the funnel process. If you talk about the economy over here, so that is the broader perspective. Once you have decided that you have to do the research in India, in Gujarat, or whatever the location that we have decided. So out of this area, you have certain industry to decide, right? On which industry I have to do my research, right? And once your industry has been decided, right? So based on the industry identification, you have to decide the certain companies on which you have to do the research, right? So that is called EIC model, right? So economic, industry, and the company which we have to do the research, right? So that is called EIC model, economic, industry, and company. So once the literature review has been done and the EIC model have been identified, we have to have theoretical formulation of research problem, right? So out of this way, you have your own topic, you have your own topic, and you have also gone through the literature review. So out of this way, you have certain idea that what has already been done in this topic, right? And what exactly you want to do on this particular topic. So the gap between these two is considered to be the problem statement. Clear? So that is called problem. Just a minute. हेलो. हाँ मैडम, खाली इतना पूछना था कि पासिंग मार्क 50 है ना ये फंडिंग के लिए. हाँ नहीं नहीं, 50 वो जो पैसे के लिए.
Sir, you can unmute, sir. Sir, can you please unmute, sir? Kunal, sir, sir, you're on mute, sir. Can you please unmute?
So till the time I was not audible. Okay, okay, fine.
No, sir.
Okay,
Just now, just now.
okay, just now. Okay, fine. Okay, so based on the theoretical problem, we have to frame certain research questions, right? Let's say, what is your gender, what is your age, what sort of problems that we are facing. So that is called empirical research questions that we need to frame. Based on the questions which we have framed, we have to design certain research design. Like, if at all we have decided that we want to go for primary study or secondary study, right? So if it is a primary study, then what would be the design? If it is secondary study, then what would be the design? Is it random? Is it not random? So that is where the cross-sectional longitudinal study, right? If it is a secondary data where time series needs to find out. So it is basically the time-based study. So where we have to go for the time series analysis. If it is a primary study in terms of research collections of data, questionnaires, and all this aspect. So we might collect the data from different people from different locations. So that would be cross-sectional study. So depending on the research design that we have defined, we have to have the data collection tools and techniques. So we must have to think about the data collections, right? If it is a primary study, then we have ample amount of options like we can go for what I can say is questionnaire, survey, research data design, right? So all those aspects. And if it is a secondary based data collection, so secondary data means we can go for the data of the companies, in terms of their profitability, in terms of their expenses, so all these data collection tools and techniques that we need to define depending upon the research design, empirical questions, and the title that we have decided, right? So data collection tools and techniques is going to be very, very important for all of us. And once we have collected the data, we might have different types of data in terms of whether it is a nominal scale, ordinal scale, or might be it is a ratio data. So nominal scale means, let's say if I'm saying gender, so gender is having two options, like I am a male or female. So, where the sequence does not matters, that means I can put male to be first and female to be first, right? So nobody's first and nobody's second, right? The ultimate purpose is to have the proper allocations of the data, right? So I have to put the data collection in terms of nominal data. If I'm asking someone to be the age of the respondent, so the age of the respondent is up to 20 years, 20 to 40, 41 to 60, and more than 60. Right. So here, the point of discussion over here is up to 20, 20 to 40, 41 to 60, and more than 60 years. So that is age, right? So age, again, it is in the sequence, like, I have it from 0 to 20, 21 to 40. So when I'm putting these options into the consideration of the data collection, I do not have a freedom to put these options to be on the random mode, because I have to put all those options to be on the sequential mode, right? That, let's say, the first would be 0 to 20, then it would be 20 to 40, 41 to 60, and more than 60. So that is called data collection. So once data collection has been done, the researcher needs to have the hunting for the application of right kind of data analysis tools and techniques. So depending upon the types of data that we have collected, we need to go for the application of data analysis tools and techniques. It is very, very important to have, the application of right kind of data analysis tools and techniques. Let's say if we have a nominal scale data, so we cannot go for the parametric, non-parametric kind of data analysis. If we have nominal and ordinal data, then we can go for parametric, non-parametric. But although we cannot go for the correlation regression where the numbering data is required. So while writing a research paper, we should have the proper idea about the type of data that we require. Because if we do not have the idea of the types of data that we require, so obviously there is a chances that we'll make a mistake in terms of data collection, either by putting the questionnaire or either through the collection of data through various mode. So it is very, very important that data collection should be done very properly. And before doing data collection, the researcher should aim for all these process that should be incorporated from here to here. All this process needs to be incorporated in a scientific manner, because once the data has been collected, the rest of the portion, the rest of the portion is completely depends upon the types of data that we have collected. So if the data has not been collected in a proper way, so ultimately the research idea, that is nothing but the title of the topic that every researcher needs to prove it, that would be on the question mark. So whenever you collect the data, you should have a proper brainstorming in terms of types of data that you require, because the data analysis tools and techniques is going to be applicable based on the types of data that you have collected. So the objective that you are framing over here based on the theoretical research problem, that should be justified based on the types of data that we have collected, right? So very, very important, and a very vigilant approach that we have to give it in terms of the data collection. And once we have analyzed those data, we have to answer in terms of the empirical research questions. It means, the objective that we have framed, so objectives that we have framed in terms of empirical questions is, so data analysis, once we have done it, so based on analysis result which we have defined, so we need to see that, the questions which we have framed over here should be answered over here or not, right? In terms of empirical questions, let's say we have framed that we want to find out the difference of opinion among the socio-demographic profile of the respondent. So based on that, we must have to see that the types of data that we have collected, based on that, the data analysis tools and techniques that we have applied, and based on that, are we in a position to answer those questions that we have framed it? So here we are talking about to answering those questions that we have framed it over here. And these questions are nothing but the objectives of the research, right? These questions are nothing but the objectives of the research that we have framed, right? So you must have to answer those questions of the research. And, based on that, you have to provide the theoretical interpretations of the result. Because interpretation, in a sense, whatever questions we have framed, are they answered in a proper way, a proper manner, so that we can go ahead? Or else, if we feel that there is certain modification, then we must go for the modification. And that's why before drafting a research paper, it is very, very important from the researcher point of view that researcher must conduct the pilot study before going for the data analysis and interpretation, because pilot study and testing is very, very important for all of us. If we are not doing at this stage, then there will be a problem for all of us. So that is where we must have to see that data interpretation should be done properly, and we must have to compare this with the earlier research. So obviously we have gone through the literature review. Based on literature review, we might have framed certain research questions. Based on that research questions, we must have certain data collection, and based on that data collection, we must have certain interpretation of the result. So we might compare those results with the earlier study in terms of literature review, and based on that, we must have certain conclusions to be derived as a part of the data analysis tools and techniques. So that we have to see to it, and according to that, we must have to see that whatever the questions, research problems that we have defined, are we in a position to answer those questions, right, in a proper way or not, right? So that is where this process is going to be. So if somebody is asking you the ideal way of drafting a research paper, so what are the basic parameters of the research paper? So the basic parameters of the research papers are, firstly, we have to draft the abstract, keyword, then this is called introduction. So this is nothing but the chapter number one, right? This introduction is chapter number one, usually. Literature review is chapter number two. Methodology is chapter number three. Data analysis and interpretation is chapter number four. Findings and conclusion is five. And recommendation is six. So this is the usual chapterization schemes as far as the research paper writing is concerned. So if somebody is asking me ideal research work, what should be written first? So I say literature review, because we have to finalize our title, we have to finalize our research problem, and we have to finalize the objective of the research. And if we have to finalize those things, we should have a proper literature review in our hands. So it is very, very important that we should have a proper literature review through which we can identify the titles. And once we have identified the titles with the help of literature review, we as a researcher must be sure that which sort of variables that we have to take into consideration. So the type of variable that we have to take into consideration, that should be the part of introduction, right? So we have to identify the different types of variables that we have to write in our research paper. And based on that, if somebody has a question that what should be the chapterization scheme in terms of the introduction chapter. So in introduction, usually you have to define the variables that you have defined in the titles of your research, right? So whatever variables, key components that we have defined on the title, that should be explained in the introduction, right? Research methodology usually contain many aspects in terms of research work, like research problems, objectives. Objectives in some cases has been written in literature review, and in some cases introduction, but it is also be the part of methodology. Yes, so methodology is consisting objective. Third is the scope of the study. That means the area in which you are going to conduct this particular study. That is the scope. Scope is not only restricted up to area, but it is basically for the EIC model. That means on which industry we are doing research, on which company we are doing research, right? So that is basically consist of scope of the study. Then we have to define the variables of the study, right? On which variable, that is already we have chapterize in terms of the introduction. So whatever chapters topic which we have written in introduction, that should be the part of variables. Then we have to define over here research design in terms of whether it is primary study or secondary study. If it is primary study, then it is cross-sectional, descriptive cross-sectional, exploratory. If it is secondary data, then it is longitudinal, time series based study, right? So this is called research design. Then sampling techniques. Are you going to collect the sample based on random? Are you going to collect the sample based on, non-probabilistic, probabilistic, convenient, non-convenient? So that is called sampling techniques. Then you also have to define the data collection tools and techniques that you have utilized as a part of your research journey, right? So here you have to define through which mode of data collection you are going for it. Either you are going for data collection based on the survey, either you are going for data collection based on the questionnaire, either you are going to collect the data based on some portals in terms of secondary data. So this kind of clarity you have to give it in terms of data collection. Then we also need to define the data analysis tools and techniques. So data analysis tools and techniques is basically consist with the objectives of the study. So whatever objective that we have framed, so according to the objective, we have to adopt the data analysis tools and techniques that we have to apply. So this data analysis tools and techniques is basically in the process of, like, if we have a process of, let's say, data in terms of what I can say is, I can say, like, I want to find out socio-demographic profile of the respondent. So I should have an idea that how to find out socio-demographic profile of the respondent. So either I can go for the frequency analysis, I can go for descriptive analysis. And this frequency and descriptive analysis should be followed by the tables and charts that we are preparing, right? So that is where it is called the data analysis tools and techniques that we have to apply. Then you also need to define sampling plan. So sampling plan means how much sample size that you are collecting for your research work. Sampling techniques is one of the part of it. Then sampling parameters. Let's say if I'm collecting data for some companies, so my sampling parameter is the time frame, right? Let's say if I'm collecting the sample for 10 years, so this 10 year is a time frame for which I'm collecting the data, you know. So this is called the sampling plan. Then you also need to have the consideration of ethical consideration of the research. What are the ethical parameters that we have taken into consideration as a part of research? So ethical consideration that should also be the part of the consideration. Then we also need to define ethical practices in terms of if at all you are using some AI tools. So how much AI tools you have used it, right? So if we are planning to publish our paper into good quality journals like Scopus, ABDC, Web of Science, you know. So here we have to provide some justification, some clarification that how much portion of AI we have used, you know, what sort of parameters we have used, right? So that is where it is called, the ethical consideration. Then limitations of this study we also have to cover in terms of the samples, geographical locations, you know. So all these aspects that we have to cover up as part of limitations. And once the data analysis has been done and interpretation has been done, so we need to conclude our study based on the research problem that we have taken up, data analysis tools that we have applied, and based on the data analysis tools and techniques, what is the ultimate comment on this particular topic? Let's say, what is your finding? So if somebody is asking me like, I want to find out the difference of opinion among the consumers for the factors affecting online bankings, right? So I want to find out for which factor the consumers are having difference of opinion, right? So based on data analysis and interpretation that I have it, I have certain findings and conclusion in my hands. Like, for this particular factor, these people are having difference of opinion, and for this particular factor, let's say for use of ease of use for online banking is one of the factor. So if I have the demographical factors in my hands, like age, gender, so it might be possible that gender might have a difference of opinion for ease of use for online banking, but there would be possibility there based on age factor. There would not be any significant difference of opinion for the ease of use factors for online banking, right? So depending upon the profile that we have it, the types of data that we have it, and based on that, we have certain findings and conclusion for our own data, right? So that is where it is findings and conclusion. Then finally, out of the finding and conclusion that we have derived, we must have to provide the recommendations of the study. So recommendation of the study is basically concern about the societal importance that we are deriving. So based on the societal importance, we have to recommend to the society that if at all you are reading this study, if at all you are reading this research paper, then what is the ultimate findings, what is the ultimate outcomes that is coming out of this study. And finally, what you are recommending to the society that if at all you are reading this particular paper in the future, what exactly you are gaining out of this research, right? So that is called recommendations of the study. So based on that, research design can be classified into these broad categories. So it can be classified into qualitative and quantitative, and nomothetic and idiographic. Basically, nomothetic and idiographic is not much important as far as social science research is concerned in terms of the commerce and management. But basically, we are concerned about the qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative research is basically non-numeric data. Let's say if I'm asking some opinions, if I'm taking some interviews of some person, that what is your opinion in terms of online banking practices? So this opinion I'm asking in terms of their opinions, in terms of recording their speech. So this speech is non-qualitative data. Either I cannot have a codings of the numberings of this data. So for this kind of research, I need to go for the some other research aspect. And basically, qualitative research is not that much scientific research because you don't have much to do tools, you don't have any figures to justify. So qualitative research are not that much utilized or not much focused in comparison to the quantitative data, because quantitative data can be provided the answers in numbers, and that numbers can be justified based on certain parameters. Like let's say if I have gender in terms of male and female, so I can define that, with the coding, that how much amount of male are higher and how much amount of female are lower. So that is one of the interpretation and findings out of the result. Even though if I have the secondary data in terms of, financial results, so I can have the result in terms of, net profit, current assets, fixed asset. So I can have, the how much growth of the, profit from, 2021 to 2025. So this growth can be identified based on the percentage, right? So this is called quantitative data, quantitative results, which I have to do it, right? So this is what the broad category of the research. Nomothetic is basically you are studying on one particular variable, and idiographic is basically you are going for multiple variables, but that does not much implied in terms of the social science research. So yes, qualitative and quantitative, you can see this. So qualitative research generally deals with the words image and subjective. So if I'm giving you this image and if I'm asking your opinion, what sort of thought that is coming in your mind, right? So people have multiple thoughts, multiple comments, multiple arguments, and multiple parameters, right? So that is how you can have some thoughts on that, right? And these thought can be recorded in terms of videos, and this video, based on the video, every people have their different assumptions, different perceptions, and different opinion. So that cannot be measured in terms of exact number. That's why qualitative research are not that much scientific in comparison to the quantitative research. And that's why people are more focused towards the quantitative research, because it usually deals in numbers, as I already mentioned. And it is a logical, because if I'm saying that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, so it is a 2, it is universal acceptance. And that helps to prove your objective to be on scientific ground with some arguments, with some numbers, with some digits, and with some facts and figures, right? So the acceptability of the quantitative research is much more better in comparison to the qualitative research in the market. So we must have to focus upon most of the quantitative research to be conducted in comparison to the qualitative, because if we are thinking about to publish our paper into good quality journal, we must have to provide the quality, and quality always comes from the acceptance, and acceptance always comes from the numbers. So usually try to prove your research to be correct on quantitative parameter. That is where the quantitative research is going to be much useful. So yes, qualitative research, if somebody is asking you the agenda, so it research activities from exploratory design to means of completing explanation. Why to use? So qualitative research assume that people have meaningful actions or experience that can be interpreted. So usually qualitative research can be conducted if we want to ask some opinion to the specific target group of people in terms of their, experience kind of things, some good people, some higher authority people. And if you want to take some opinion of that, so we can conduct this qualitative research. So agenda for data collections, areas for data collection of qualitative research. So what is how the qualitative research and how the data for the qualitative research will comes from? So it is always comes from the economical data. Let's say you are reading some newspaper or something, and if you are reading the column of some experienced person like economist from government officials, so that is where it comes from. Second aspect is it is flexible, so this data is always comes to be flexible, it should not be that much monotonous. It can be modified, and every person have a different opinion, right? So depending upon the difference of opinion, every person can modify, and make it their convenient as per their own requirement. Then third aspect is opens the door to why and how. So qualitative research also provides some argument based on, why you are doing this research, how you will conduct this research, right? So it always deals on the options called why and how. Richness of data. So qualitative data is providing, some pictures, some data visualization tools, So somehow if you are looking on in it, and that can be modified by someone depending upon the, the requirement of the target audience. So, the looking aspect, the showroom aspect of qualitative data is much more better in terms of quantitative, because it looks good. It attracts people in terms of data visualization tools, right? And based smart with, right? And if you want to start your research journey, so you must start your research to be on qualitative research. Let's say if you're a beginner of the research, and if you want to do the research on certain topics, so at least you can cover up 20 to 30 research paper, and you just read those research paper, and based on this research paper, at least you can conclude that, what is there in this topic and what is not there in this topic, right? So qualitative research is always, as a beginner, it always good to start with. So you must go for it as a qualitative data. So yes, if you are going for quantitative research in a survey, so you must see this. If you are going for a telephonic interview, you can go for traditional phone. You can ask the questions, opinions, or people's perception on the telephone, and the same thing you can do it for computer assisted telephonic interview. Like we are attending this session on this Google Meet. So Google Meet is one of the computer assisted telephonic interview. So you can ask the people, what is your opinion, what is your perception, what is your take out. So that is called computer assisted telephonic interview. Then you also need to see this personal. So personal, that means in home. You visit to the respondent at their home and you must ask their opinion in terms of their survey. Then second is you can take the appointments. You can take the appointment of the people and you can ask their opinion. And you can also have the random personal interview. You can have the random interviews of the people. You can ask the people about their opinion and accordingly you can take the survey. You can also ask the opinion through the email. You can have the email questionnaire, just like we are doing it as far as when we want to go for the quantitative data, we are sending the questionnaires to the people through the email, and we can also mail to the panel. Let's say if we don't have one particular person, but let's say we have the multiple peoples in terms of the group of people. So we can also email those questionnaire and we can also ask them to fill up this particular questionnaire and give their opinion and suggestions for this particular topic or area on which we are looking for the responses. Then if we are going for electronics, so again, email and internet is one of the aspect. So this is how we can collect the data. Then comparison. So if you want to compare between quality and quantitative research, so the basic comparison is research objective. So it is a discovery of new ideas, insights, and feelings. If we are going for qualitative, if you are going for quantitative, so that is basically the validation of facts, estimation, and relationship, right? So that is why the quantitative data is much more useful in comparison to the qualitative, because here we are talking about the validation of the aspect, So that is why it is going to be much more useful in comparison to the other aspect. Then types of research, if we are going for qualitative, so qualitative is basically focusing upon exploratory research, where we have to explore some new things, new theories, new ideas, new topic, and descriptive in terms of quantitative and casual. So descriptive means we want to describe certain scenario in terms of collection of the data. So definitely we can go for the descriptive research, right? So we may describe that, why things has happened, how it has happened, what are the loopholes in terms of data and numbers, so that we can describe. And at the same time, we can also have a cause and effect relation in terms of causal research. So we may define that, if this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, in terms of establishing relationship between the different variables in terms of whether this variable is behaving independently or whether is this particular variable is behaving dependently, right? So that is where dependency and independency of the research is also going to be established. The types of questions that needs to ask as far as qualitative research is concerned. So usually in qualitative research, we must need to ask the open-ended questions. So whenever we are going for qualitative research, we must need to ask open-ended questions, sometimes semi-structured and unstructured questions needs to be asked. But mainly, if you are going for qualitative research, the basic types of questions which we need to ask is open-ended. And if you are going for quantitative, so it is mostly a structured questions, right? So if you are going for quantitative research, it is mostly structured questions. Now, classification of research design, right? So classification of research design means, let's say if I'm going for research design in terms of exploratory and conclusive. So exploratory is basically exploring the topics which is based on qualitative research. But if we are going for conclusive research, which is basically quantitative research. So quantitative research is again bifurcated into two aspects, that is called descriptive research and casual research. So even in quantitative, we need to describe certain scenarios, that why male people are preferring online banking, why female people are preferring online banking, right? So that is called the describing the certain scenario. And casual effect means casual research means we are defining the effect on each of the variables in terms of cause and effect. Let's say if I'm putting some changes in X, then I need to identify what is the changes happening into Y, right? So that is called cause and effect relation. That is called causal research. So descriptive research can also be further bifurcated into cross-sectional research design. Cross-sectional means if I'm asking the same questions to the multiple people at the different time period, so that is called cross-sectional research design. And కదా నేను లెక్చర్స్ అయిపోయి కర్సో లెక్చర్ చాలా cross-sectional research design, right? And longitudinal means it is a time period based study, right? Let's say if I'm doing this 10 factors, 10 years of data. So how this data is going to be useful in terms of time period. So that is called longitudinal study. So this is called longitudinal design. Yeah. So based on this research design mechanism, what mechanism we need to follow? So the first is statement of the problem. So we must need to see the problems. What are the problems that has been faced by these two people? And we also need to define the review of previous study. That is called literature review that we have to do it. So this is a part of research methodology chapter number 3. We also need to define the scope of study in terms of, where we have to conduct this particular study in terms of area, geographical locations, in terms of the variables that we are collecting, types of variables we are collecting. Right. The fourth is objectives of the study. What are the basic objectives, to carry out this particular studies. The objective should be 3 to 4, 5 max to max. Based on objectives, what we have framed, we have to define the hypothesis of the study. So H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and so on, right? So this is called hypothesis. Operational definition of the concept is very, very important. Then we also need to define the significance of this study in terms of what this study has importance in terms of the society. So that is called significance of the study. Geographical areas to be covered, what sort of locations that we are going to cover, that is called geographical area, in terms of either you are going to conduct in Gujarat state, either you are going to conduct in Tamil Nadu state, so depending upon the geographical locations that we have to cover, we have to put into practices. Methodology, research design, which methodology we are going to use as a part of research, so that is called the part of methodology. Then sampling plan, what type of samples that we are going to cover as a part of research, right? So that is called sampling plan. Tools for gathering data, from which kind of tools we are going to cover up this data. And finally, we have to define the chapterization schemes. So statement of problem, what statement of problem needs to cover? So it is basically done from the literature review. So whatever literature review that we are doing it, based on that, we have to define certain problems and based on which the research needs to carry out, right? So that is called problem statement. Scope of study. So that is called research area and parameters that we are going to cover as a part of research. Objectives, that is overall the scope and the point to be covered in terms of title. Hypothesis. So to prove the objective, what sort of hypothesis we need to frame? So hypothesis basically framed in null and alternate, right? So depending upon the types of hypothesis. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
okay, thank you.
Can continue.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So hypothesis design is basically depending upon the objectives that we have framed. We have to design the hypothesis. Yeah. Okay. So hypothesis can be classified into null and alternative. So null hypothesis is basically start with no, and alternative hypothesis always start with positive statement. So no difference, and there is a difference. That is two aspect. And as far as the acceptance and rejection criteria of null hypothesis, so null hypothesis is always going to be rejected if the p-value comes less than 0.05, and alternate hypothesis is always going to be rejected when the p-value is coming greater than 0.05, right? So this is how we have to bifurcate. Okay, so this is called hypothesis design. Then significance of the study. So significance of the study is basically consisting the importance of the study, right? So if we are doing this research into the society, what exactly the importance that we need to bring it out to the society, that is called the significance of the study that we need to define. So significance of the study is basically very, very important to define in our research. If we are to define the research significance, then research has no relevance into the market, right? So the significance of the study needs to define. Okay. Then, okay, so significance of the study is basically consist of the importance of the study for the research people and the society. That is called significance of the study. Geographical area means in which area we want to cover up this particular research. That is called geographical area. So that could be particular area, college, schools, right? It could be from the human perspective, which type of human you want to cover up, physical locations, regional geography in terms of states and all this, cities which you want to cover up, or that might be integrated. Sampling plan, that is sampling unit. With sampling plan, with sampling unit, you need to cover out of the population. Sample size, that is the number of members that you need to take it out from the population. So depend upon the type of and size of population that you have it is our responsibility to carry out the appropriate number of sample size as a part of research. And sampling procedure is basically cover up with the type of data and that we have it, and type of data that we have collected from the market, either from the people on a random basis or random sampling. If we have asked the purpose of research and if the people are aware about this research and then we have cover up this data, then it is called non-probabilistic convenience sampling, right? So this is not a random. So depending upon the objective that we have framed and the type of data that we are planning to cover up, we have framed sampling procedure. Tools for gathering data. So these are the various tools through which we can gather the data. So that is in terms of quantitative, in terms of either we can go for face-to-face interview of the people. We can also cover up the data in terms of online mode, either, to have online interactions or might be sending our data through the emails or other mode of, communication. So that is one of the aspect is email that we are doing it. Either we can have the telephonic communication and we may ask for the opinion to the people, right? So these are the various tools to collect the data. Type of data. So this is nominal scale. We have already discussed, like if I'm asking some people, what is your gender? So if people needs to answer this question, so either it could be male or female. But if at all as a researcher, if I need to put these variables into consideration, then I don't have any other alternatives like, whether I should put the male to be first or female to be first. I can put either or to be first. That is called, the sequence does not matters over here as far as the group is concerned for the variable, right? So that is called nominal scale. Ordinal scale means the data should be in order in terms of Likert scale, from strongly disagrees to strongly agree, right? And that could be in a, sequencing like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Interval data means if we are putting some grades of the students in terms of marks, so this is called grade marking starting with 0, right? So there is always arbitrary 0 point in this interval, and ratio is pure number. Let's say if I'm taking the data for the profit, so that profit could be either 0.1 rupees, but it could be 0.1, right, which could not have arbitrary 0 point. It is a pure number, right? So that is called ratio data. So choosing the variables of the study. So yes, independent variable and dependent variable usually matters in regression. Like let's say if I'm making any changes in X, then what is the impact on Y? So that is called the relation of independent and dependent variable. Category and continuous variable. So category means, let's say if I have gender to male and female, so that is category in the variable, right? So that is category. And continuous means ordinal scale data, right? Let's say age. So 0 to 20, 21 to 40, 41 to 60, and more than 60. So that is called continuous number, where the sequence cannot be breaked and order does matters. And then you have quantitative variables and qualitative. Qualitative is always in your non-numeric data, and quantitative means it covers everything independent, dependent, category, continuous, which is in numbers. So data analysis tools and techniques, you can apply frequency analysis on nominal ordinal scale. Descriptive, again, you can apply mean, median, mode, chi-square test for nominal and ordinal type of data. And you can also apply parametric test in terms of one sample t-test, independent sample t-test, one-way ANOVA, paired sample t-test. Non-parametric test you can apply in terms of Mann-Whitney U-test, Kruskal-Wallis test, and exploratory factor analysis on scale data. Confirmatory factor analysis, once you have explored the data, you can confirm those factors. And finding and conclusion based on whatsoever data that you have collected, and based on the data, whatever data analysis tools and techniques that we have applied, we need to conclude in terms of summing up the paper. And that is very, very important, that finding and conclusion ultimately leads to the introduction part of the data. So that is very important that we should take those things into consideration and apply the right kind of findings and conclusion with the consideration of data analysis tools, research methodologies, sampling techniques, research design, problems. All those aspects needs to cover as a part of findings, and that should also be reflected as a summary in the abstract of the research paper, right? So if somebody is asking you what should be the part of abstract, so abstract basically covers the introduction of the topic, research problem, data collection tools, data analysis tools, and all this aspect. And recommendations out of this, what should be your recommendation out of this study? So based on finding and conclusion, you as a researcher must have certain observation. So based on those observation, you have to conclude, you have to recommend something to the society. So that is called recommendations of the study in terms of key findings, outcomes, or information in your report, right? And you must acknowledge the limitations of the study in terms of, you have covered up certain geographical location, but due to which you missed out certain other geographical location as a future work, right? So that is where you have to acknowledge the limitation. And you also need to highlight the significance or usefulness of your work, right? You must need to highlight the usefulness and significance in terms of the society. So that's it from my side. Now I'm putting this platform open for question answer. You can ask any questions if you have it. Yes, any questions? Any questions if you have it, please.